Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and the Orville once again delivered an incredible sci-fi drama with the season premiere of New Horizons: Electric Sheep. I gotta say, I've loved the Orville for several years now. It's everything that Star Trek should be, and that track record has continued into this episode. Because the thing that made the greatest Star Trek episodes of the past were its delving into ethics and philosophy rather than politics. That is a very distinct difference. When it comes to ethics and philosophy, there's not always a clear answer. And a lot of people on different sides of an issue can be right. That's why Civil War was such a compelling movie, because that was more of a philosophy standpoint and one that both sides had arguments for. And that's what this first episode was very much about, and very much a callback to classic TNG, where how it looked at each side of an argument. Everyone had reasons to believe that what they did, and even the people on the opposite side had doubts, because it's a very complicated issue for which this episode addressed. Now, there wasn't a whole lot of action in this episode, and that's fine. Star Trek isn't Star Wars. It isn't an action-packed thriller, and the Orville, being a parody of Star Trek, isn't either. It's more about the idea of space travel in the near future. It's the idea of exploration. It's the idea of a hopeful future. It's the idea of humanity being the best that it can possibly be. And if we're the best that we can be, conflict is going to be avoided at all costs, so action is going to be kept to a minimal. And I think that's fine, and I think that's one of the big drawbacks of the JJ Trek era, because they just became action flicks, devoid of any of the heart or the thought that went behind classic Star Trek. And Orville is just the perfect sequel to everything Star Trek. I just consider it a part of the Star Trek universe, maybe an alternate universe. All you need to do is change a couple names and a couple uniforms, maybe not even that, and it could fit soundly within the Star Trek universe. So I'm very happy with this episode. I will be going to spoilers briefly, so spoiler alert. But the main part of this episode is Isaac reintegrating into the Orville society after the whole K-line conflict that was in Identity Part 1 and Part 2. He did make some mistakes, but he ended up turning against his own people and making himself a pariah from his own society, alone in a different society that hated him so vehemently. But he made that choice to protect two young boys. They were what connected him. That's what made him closer to being human. And his arc is very much like Data from the classic TNG. It's an android's quest to be more human, and it's a very fascinating one. Now, Data's is a little bit different just because he's more humanoid in appearance, and he has an emotional chip, and he's able to express himself a lot better. He's further along in the journey from day one, but Isaac is also on that journey well before that. And it's just fascinating to see how he reacts to, murderer being painted on the walls of his lab, to this started out to be this very sweet encounter with this new girl, Charlie, turned into this "you deserve all the pain in the existence" speech from her. And it was very, very compelling. Everything with Isaac was beautiful, and it makes sense why he was driven to suicide in the middle of the episode, because it's the only way for him to understand his place here is with pure logic, and he believed that he was a detriment to the crew's efficiency. And it all tracked, but it all came directly after an encounter with Marcus, one of the boys that he betrayed his society for. And Marcus said he wished he was dead. And as much as Isaac will attempt to deny it, there is some emotion into his decision to immediately thereafter commit suicide. And it's profound. And it's very well put out, because yes, suicide for an android may seem different, but at the end of the day, they still struggle with the same issues that a human does when facing suicide. And I think it was very, very well done. And a lot of different people in the crew were on different sides on whether or not Isaac should have been reactivated. And even the people on both sides were very doubtful. Even Captain Mercer, who was the one who decided and fought for Isaac to be reactivated after he was deactivated during the battle with the Kalons, is doubtful. He doesn't know if reactivating Isaac was the right decision, and he keeps a close eye on him. Even Gordon, who was one of Isaac's closest friends, at least the equivalent, and he's even doubtful. And so it's very much about ethics and philosophy, and even a bit of pragmatic of how they're able to defeat the Kalons in the long run in a situation like this when they're so vastly outgunned by the superior technology. There's a lot of competing stuff going on with the Isaac storyline in this episode, and I think it was very well done without demonizing anyone from any particular side. Even Charlie, who was the most extreme of any parties involved and who hated Isaac more than anybody else, it wasn't demonizing her for her opinion, and she wasn't necessarily wrong because Isaac's decisions did end up killing so many people, hundreds of people, and her best friend specifically. And it's completely understandable why she would hold such resentment against him. But it's masochistic at the end, as even Gordon pointed out. And she made the right decision in the end because a boy asked her to, because Marcus felt guilty because he thought that he was the one responsible for Isaac's death, which could be true from a certain point of view, but that's where the ethics and the philosophy come into this episode. And it was just phenomenally done by all the characters. Charlie is a great addition to the crew, and I'm just so excited to see these people back, this crew back. It's one of my favorite crews from any television show, and just really excited to see how they all move forward, going forward into this new season. And it may or may not be the last season. I've heard conflicting reports on it. I hope it's not, but if it is, I hope they give them a good send-up because these are all incredible characters. And something that I, of course, have to mention is there was a sweet but short in memoriam to Norm at the beginning of the episode. And, it sucks what happened to him. And he's so great as Lieutenant Yaphet that it felt right. It felt needed. And there is some things that I'm a little bit conflicted on, specifically the addition of the fighter jets, the fighters for the Orville that they're testing out, and that Gordon seems to be in charge of test piloting and whatnot. It was a very cool sequence that I very much enjoyed, them testing it out, seeing how fast it could maneuver around the Orville in the shipyard and whatnot. But I do have a little bit of conflict. It is an exploration ship, and that's why Star Trek rarely, if ever, had fighters. It does make sense for them to have them now because they're going into a wartime scenario, and I think Star Trek could have benefited from fighters in wartime scenarios as well. But at the end of the day, they are exploration vehicles. That's why they never had them previously. And so I get the reasoning behind it. It is important for them to have them going forward. I'm just not 100% on board because it makes it more Star Wars than anything else. And the design of the jets, I didn't particularly enjoy. They're just smaller versions of the Orville. I think they should have a very unique design because they have different requirements and different needs. Very, very small nitpick on the basis of nitpicking that doesn't affect my overall enjoyment, just something that I felt like needed to be mentioned. And otherwise, the production design and the CGI was incredible. I really like how this series is showing very dynamic planets. It's not just single environment planets. And that's, say what you want about the prequels, but the CGI at the time made it possible to show very diverse planets, diverse environments, and things that we couldn't possibly imagine. And then the sequels, with even better CGI, went back on that and went back to just the binary environments. And I think that was a mistake, that we need our classic desert planets, we need our classics this and our classics that, but we want to see the occasional gas giant with orange smoke clouds everywhere. You want to see all these incredible planets that we can't fathom. That's the type of stuff that makes the galaxy feel real, makes it feel depth, makes it feel different. It's not just homogeneous one environment planets. That seems very boring to me. So I'm really happy that the Orville is getting back to showing some more of those dynamic planet designs, and I hope to see very more of them in the future. And as I kind of mentioned before, some of the peripheral characters in Isaac's storyline were Charlie and Marcus, and they both had some incredible arcs. Mark's opening sequence, his dream sequence, was a tad long. I think you could accomplish everything that was needed from the dream sequence from just the last 30 seconds of it, but it did go on a little long, but it was such a cool action sequence that I was fine with them dragging out his dream. Wasn't a super big deal, but his arc into, starting to be manhood and then realizing that he's just a scared kid at the end of the day, and realizing that his relationship with Isaac, though damaged, was still intact, because Isaac had done so much for him and his brother and his mother for so many years that he couldn't let go of him as much as he tried to, as much as he wanted to, painting the graffiti on his lab wall. He wanted to let go of Isaac, but he couldn't. And it was a very well self contained arc within the episode. It was very well done. Same with Charlie's arc from adamantly hating Isaac. And that didn't really change, but her understanding of people on the other side of the argument of whether or not he should be allowed to live was an interesting one. And Marcus was the key to that, because Marcus was the only one on the ship that she believed hated Isaac as much as she did. And if Marcus was able to let go, if Marcus was able to forgive and ask for her help, then maybe she was wrong to be so masochistic. And I think it was very well done, the ethics of it. I hope to see more of Charlie. She was a great addition to the crew. And overall, this was a great Star Trek episode, a great Orville episode, just a great episode of television overall. The ethics and philosophy were so well done and so timeless. This is what Kurtzman specifically misunderstands about Star Trek. Political stuff and current day stuff ages quickly, but the idea of prejudice against one's enemy and even a traitor from the enemy who's helping you is something that we've experienced through all human history and will continue. And it's not done from an us versus them type mindset when exploring the issue. It's done from a philosophy standpoint. In philosophy, there's not necessarily any right or wrong answers. And I think that's some of the beauty of classic Star Trek and some of the beauty of this show. So I very much enjoyed this episode of The Orville. I'd have to give it an 8 out of 10, maybe an 8.5. It was incredible. I'm so happy that The Orville is back and so looking forward to watching this story continue and these characters continue. And I hope we see years and years more of this incredible universe created by Seth MacFarlane, who I have a lot of personal issues with, but he makes some damn good Star Trek. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.